You've come to the right place if you're looking to create, launch, and scale a high-value online training program. I'm your guide, Chris Badgett. I'm the co-founder of LifterLMS, the most powerful learning management system for WordPress. Stay to the end. I've got something special for you. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to another episode of LMS Cast. I'm joined by a special guest. Her name is Stephanie Hudson. She's from Bertha.ai, which is, we'll get into that in just a second, but she's also the creator of a newsletter called Sizzle.ai. AI for course creators. Steph, what is it? And take us in at a high level.
Well, I don't know if you guys listening out there have heard about this little thing called AI that's been happening in the tech world lately, but it is the generative AI is where it's at. So it's generating content, images, text, all kind of things. And for course creation, this is awesome because what is a course but tons of content, right? You've got to get that. The biggest hurdle, a lot of times we see people who are creating a course, right? They've got something in here and they know that it would be beneficial to other people, but how do you get it from in here to out there in the world where people can benefit from it and you can make some money off of it, right? So you got LifterLMS, that's great, but you got to still get all this out of here into that vehicle to transport to them. And AI is a great tool for doing that. It doesn't replace your knowledge, your expertise. It just helps you to get it out of your head.
That's
sorry,
awesome.
I caught you taking a sip.
It's okay. It's okay. And I mean, I like to think of myself as an early adopter of technology. And when I
You
first
sure are, yeah.
when I first saw Bertha.ai, I was impressed, but I'm like, I'm not sure how I can use this. And then you actually jumped on a call with me and you started demoing. We actually did I was like, well, how can I use this as a course creator? And you showed me like, well, pick a topic and we can come up with like a course outline and, kind of use that as a starting point. And I think we did some kind of like how to do this niche type of investing. And then it like spit out this outline, which as a course creator is essential. And a lot of what we have is the expert's curse. We don't really know how to like chunk things into steps unless we're trained as a teacher or whatever. And I just found that idea generation and that organization ability and just the speed of it all is just kind of mind blowing. So
It's so fun.
And like you said, like it's not, the human isn't like no longer has a job. Like you need to work with it just like any tool. But how can we use something like Bertha.ai? Like we can do outlines. You kind of mentioned images and text, but there's a lot of different types of text, like in the course content and the marketing. Like give us a laundry list of ideas how we can apply AI.
Do a course, or I mean, you can use it actually on the entire website that you're putting out there for your course as well. So within Bertha, just at the time of this recording, it just went out last week that we've got chat with Bertha. So it's very similar to ChatGPT. It's based on the same engine and everything. So you can get in there and ask Bertha questions. And so if you're feeling stuck, you could even say something like, how do I start to create a course? You could even ask those kind of questions, like the questions that you're thinking about. Now, Chris, I know you have tons of training and other materials online to help people get started as well. But when it comes to actually formulating like what you're going to say to people, if you have a topic idea, you can put that into Bertha and ask her to generate all of the surrounding bits. Could you help me generate a title for this that would be engaging? You can control the tone that she uses as well. So if you want to be very authoritative and expert level on things, you can use that. If you want to be a little bit irreverent, witty, silly, you can do something like that. She's not hilarious. Like none of the AIs are hilarious, but they can go lighter and they can definitely go serious and professional and things like that. So that's kind of fun. And then you can, and let me take it a step before that even. If you don't know what to teach, but you want to create a course, Because courses are cool and course creators are the coolest, right? So if you just know that you want to get on the bandwagon and create a course for yourself, your business, you could get into Bertha and start a conversation with her and ask for suggestions. You could say like, these are my areas of expertise. What could I teach? You could say like, I'm a pet owner and I know how to train dogs and I have a bird that sings and whatever it is, you can list things that you have and say like, could I create, like, what kind of course could I create about with this skill set? And she'll tell you. So you can do it like that, even like before you've even started to build the thing. So then you get into it and it can like within each step. And with Bertha is actually, we've got a module specifically to help course creators. So you can go into the Bertha chat where you can just talk free form and have a back and forth conversation with an AI basically. Or you can use the specific prompts that we've created and refined a bit to actually specifically. So you enter in a certain couple fields like the topic, the certification, what's the end result? Do they get a certificate? Do they get a gold star? Whatever it is, you put in those things and then it will generate your course outline, the big long, like the description basically that you would see. Like when we did our example, we went to Udemy, I think. Was it Udemy that we went to the website and the big course description, not the little snippet, not the whole course, but that's the thing that we really are helping generate. Once you get that, then you've got building blocks and you can take that and go with it from there. You can use Bertha to still help you generate the in-depth content right within each field inside Lifter. So it's pretty awesome.
That's awesome. And let's talk about the WordPress connection, the chat GBT thing with, like this chat interface. And I know that's available with Bertha now too, which is awesome. But Bertha started from within the WordPress community. And this is kind of a visual thing. So let's see if we can talk about it like through the audio format. But if I'm in my WordPress dashboard or on a piece of content, like a page or a post or a lesson, what are these like different building blocks that we can use within Bertha to create different types of content? You mentioned the course description, but how else can we, like, what other little pieces can we ask Bertha to do of a website?
For sure. So when you install the Bertha AI plugin, for starters, let's just explain that it is a plugin in the WordPress repository, right? And so let me open up my Bertha right here, and I'm gonna just read out to you some of the different prompts that are inside Bertha. So there's when you're in your WordPress dashboard, there's a menu on the side that says to launch Bertha, but pretty much any field that you go into when you're building a site, it has the little purple icon, little robot face of Bertha. You can open it up and then there are templates that are within there. So here are some of them. If you're writing a website, you could generate a call to action for your button, like the different, instead of just saying click here, you could create a unique value proposition for your company. You could generate a product or a service description. So if you're doing an e-commerce site, this one can also be used on things like courses. It can write a full about page in one prompt. You can do FAQs are a really great one. Those are useful on course websites and other sites too, but you can generate not only the list of FAQs, but it'll then break down each one and you can have it write answers to them as well.
I think you're muted, Steph. I think you did the reverse mute. You
Sorry. Did you hear me cough?
We did.
And
it's
then
all
I
right,
did, and then I muted myself.
Yeah, it's okay.
Great job, Steph.
That's what
So
we need
I tried so hard to be
for.
slick. I was trying to be slick about it. Oh, I failed. So there's also some higher level frameworks that you can take advantage of. If anybody is interested in copywriting and how it works and some of the methodology and tactics that are used there are different frameworks like the PAS framework, problem, agitate, solution.
Okay, cool.
Problem, agitate, solution. I feel like you'd be all about these frameworks. You
I
like
do
an
love
acronym.
copywriting. I do love
Yeah.
copywriting. So
The AIDA, do you know that one?
attention,
That's
interest, decision, action.
yeah. Basically, we say awareness,
Oh,
interest, desire, action. But yeah,
okay.
they're all the same. Yeah. So you can also do an outline for a blog post and then go back in and put the outline items into Bertha and generate paragraphs. So really,
Hold on.
you
I
can
just
do all
want to
this stuff.
say, I want to park there because when you first showed it to me, I didn't quite get the power of that. And this outline concept is similar to
Yeah,
making a course syllabus.
yeah,
So instead
for
of
sure.
thinking about it as a one and done, like you can interact with AI at different layers. Like, okay, first I need like a strategy. Like, hey, I have these interests. What should I make a course about or whatever? Like super high level. But then once you make
Mhm.
a decision, you can be like, all right, well, let's come up with the outline. And then, okay, that's cool. Let's chunk that outline into like some steps, like a sub out, indent sub
Mhm.
components. And then let's pull out this sub component and ask the AI to create content for that component or whatever. Like it's not like a one and done, like, hey, create an about page or hey, create a course. There's all these like layers and you just keep working it. And then the magic happens when the human and the machine just work together to create the best
Exactly.
possible, right?
Right. So you're not going to put in one sentence and it's going to generate an entire course for you,
Yeah,
right?
like
Like as you're saying.
I want a passive income producing course, on my website. Go. Yeah, you
Right.
got to take it
No.
in phases.
But the cool thing is that makes it you, even though it's generated by an AI, because you are giving it the building blocks that it's creating content with.
Yeah.
And then you go back. The other key is, there's a lot of concern or backlash or whatever you want to call it about how Google views AI content or how humans read it and stuff. And if you just only let the AIs generate content and you never touch it after that, yeah, that's not ideal. Like it needs edited, and that's okay. I don't think that that's a flaw of the AI. I don't think it's like, oh, it's not making it perfect. I think that's what's allowing, like you said, the combination of the humans and the robots is the best, because then that's where you make it truly unique. You make it you, and then it elevates it beyond what you could do by yourself or what the robot could do by itself. So it's the what's that expression? It's greater than the sum of its parts or something. Is that,
That's
that
it.
expression where you can, yeah.
And I just want to build on that idea too, is one of my frustrations with writing, especially with outsourcing writing, is that there's actually three phases. There's research, then there's writing, and then there's editing. So what I've found is that whenever I've tried to outsource writing, I may get somebody who writes something, but they didn't do the research, or somebody
Yeah.
who's good at research but doesn't know how to write, or who doesn't edit. So like when you think about working with AI, or with a person, I'm just saying, like when it comes to creating a
Right.
great piece of content, you got to go through the three phases, and you can use AI to do all of that. Like I
Well, and
used
it
it,
does the
yeah,
first two in like seconds.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
asked for a statistic the other day, like, hey, I need a stat about the e-learning industry, and like it was like boom, 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 and it was like, holy cow, like that would have taken me forever to find.
And so I don't know if your audience is up to speed on how this kind of works, but I'll just give a quick little primer that basically Bertha is based on an engine created by OpenAI, which is this company that's been very much in the news and things like that. And so there are other engines out there. They're called large language models. And what that basically means is that it has been fed the internet.
Yeah.
Like it's been fed tons of content, not the entire internet. It only goes up to like, I think September of 2021 or something like that. But it's been fed literally billions of lines of text. And so it has been able to absorb and basically sort of learn. I mean, it's not sentient, it's not really learning, but basically it's got all this information. And then the way it works is it it then generates content based on what it has learned in a similar way that humans do. So I'm talking to you right now, and I'm going to answer. You ask me a question. I don't know all of the things I'm going to say. I'm going to come up with one word after another. Like I might have an idea, and then the way I say it, if you asked me the same question tomorrow, I might give you the same answer, but the words would be slightly different. And it's similar with AI. It's not going to spit out pre-programmed answers to a certain question. It's literally putting one word after another based on, instead of actually learning like humans do, it's more like probability, like what word should come next. And so it builds its sentences in that way, like one word after another, which is just mind-blowing how anybody figured out how to create these things. It's so wild, isn't it?
It is really wild. And another thing I've learned just going deeper on it is, and you guys have figured this out at Bertha, is the prompt matters, the question matters. And I heard this concept on another podcast called prompt engineering. Like what the question or the idea was, okay, if AI is also going to write code and write software, what does a developer do, or how do we future proof our career? And the concept I heard was, we'll get really good at prompt engineering, which is knowing what to ask or tell the AI to do. Like that's where the creative director human comes in. So you can actually do more with faster, but you still need like a director, if you will. So how do we write great prompts? Like how do we prompt? I know the software has it built in, but how do we become better question askers?
Right. So that's if you go to Chat GPT or even Bertha Chat, there's so many, there's an Ask Me Anything module in Bertha too. That's just a free form sort of thing where you can just put in whatever prompt. The prompt, in the lingo of the AI generators, is the thing you ask or the instructions you give. It's what you put in. You're prompting the AI. So just to clarify that. And then, so what happens is you can do it in a free form way, but what Bertha AI has done, and many of the other tools that are out there, there's 10 new ones every single day at this point, but they create these little fields and things like that. So it's more of a structured prompt. So for example, on the course description, it's already built in there what it should do with what you give it. So we have little fields like, what's the title? What's the subject? What's the certification? All these different things that you fill in. And then we've already trained Bertha to spit out her answer in a certain format, listed in an outline, put this headline at the bottom that shows the certificate, like all of those things. If you don't use one of those formulated ones, then you just have to say those things in your free form prompt that you're putting in, which you're totally able to do. Those pre-made prompts are just shortcuts, basically, just to make it even easier on you. So the best way, I think, to learn how to do prompts is to play around with it. It's a real easy way to start to learn. And you can start, you put something in and you see what you get. And then you tweak it and you see what you get. And you sort of have this back and forth. And that really is the best way. The other way is to watch other people doing it. So Andrew Palmer and I have done a couple Ask Me Anythings in the group where we go and just say like, hey, let's write a blog post together, or let's write it out, like whatever it is we decide to do. And people are always like, oh, that's how it is. Kind of like when I showed you some of this stuff, right? Yeah. Like you can have a concept of it, but until you really see it, you're like, oh, wait, so I could do X, Y, and Z with this. Then your brain starts to kind of get carried away with it.
That's awesome. Tell us more about tone. Like I heard somebody, like you said, it's all about modeling somebody or hearing a cool example. Mm-hmm. I heard on a podcast, somebody was like, okay, have it write something and then have it restate it using the rhetorical devices of Barack Obama. and then so I did that with something. I was like, holy cow, now I sound like this inspirational speaker guy. But yeah, what are the tone options? And I'm not going away. I'm just putting a log on the fire. So keep talking.
Okay. Chris is the only guy I know who would have a fire burning in his office with his outer space backdrop and his Britney Spears concert microphone. Anyway, so now I forgot the fire thing. I forgot what was your question, Chris? Come back from the fire. We were talking about tone. That's right.
Yeah,
tone. I remember now.
Tone.
So it learns, the AI has learned from so many different sources that it can identify. So it understands who has written different things. So it's like, there's no list. It's unlimited. You can say like, using like in the tone of Barack Obama, combined with Kevin Hart or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, you can even combine things. You can say anything. And if you are stuck for some inspiration on that, the coolest thing is you can just ask Bertha. We did that once on a live in the Facebook group, the Bertha Facebook group. So the video's still up there, but somebody asked a similar question, like, what tones could we use? And so we just opened up the Ask Me Anything on Bertha and said, give me a list of 50 tones. And it just rattled them off. Those weren't celebrity ones or anything. They were just like witty, irreverent, professional, light, sassy, whatever, just listed a million of those. And you can combine them. You can do anything. So it's really fun.
Tell us about your newsletter, the Sizzle.ai. What's that about?
This is new. And it is like Bertha's a sponsor of it, but it's not about Bertha specifically. I'm just geeking out over all of this AI stuff, Chris. I love it. You and I got into an awesome conversation when we talked, and there is so much happening so fast. You guys, not to be overly dramatic, but like we're on the cusp of a new revolution. Like, we've had like the Industrial Revolution. We've had, like all these different points in history where innovation has made a massive change. And, we've seen certain things like this in our lifetime, of course, with computers, the internet, all of this stuff. And this is the next major thing, because this is going to change everything. It really is. I know that sounds very dramatic, but the way we all work, and it's much like we already can't imagine going about our day without our smartphone, navigating us from one place to the other, like voice texting people while we drive, doing everything, like communicating with our friends and family. Everything we do is on our phones, and we can't imagine that we didn't have that. And yet, 10, 12 years ago, it was nothing like this. So this is what's happening now. In the next decade, we're not going to remember or like imagine how we went about our days without AI. I really believe that. Like, that's how revolutionary all of this stuff is. And the speed with which it is accelerating is phenomenal. The stuff that has changed already just in the past few months is almost mind-blowing. So it's going to keep going. And I'm already like, I'm into it, and I like reading about it and learning about it. And so I've seen other people do it too. And I thought, well, why not take some other people along for the ride? Since I'm already out there reading it, I'm just going to start a newsletter. I may do a little podcast about it too. But anyway, it's the Sizzle.ai. That's called the Sizzle because, you know why? Do you smell that? That's the future cooking. That's my dorky tagline.
Well, on the effective dorky techie stuff, one of the things I love thinking about is like second, third order effects, fourth order effects. Like, so the first thing the first order effect of AI is like, oh my gosh, students are going to use this to write their essays. What do we do? But there's like second order effects that come after that. Like, okay, well, how does this change education? How does this change the role of teachers? And then what does that change then cause to die, accelerate, change, whatever? Like, what are some like more further out there, less obvious, second, third order effects you might see happening because of AI that people aren't even realizing yet, who haven't spent as much time as you, like thinking about this and geeking out about this and observing society and everything?
That's a tough question, but I think the education area is really an important one right now because what it makes me think about, like I sort of go backwards into history to compare it to different things. And one that is not so far back is when you would be in math class and you weren't allowed to use your calculator.
Mm.
You had to do the math. And why? Because it's not like you're going to be having a calculator in your pocket everywhere you go. Guess what? We do, right? So what does that mean? And the fact of it is, like, yeah, we don't have to do tons of long division or algebra in our brains, and we do have these tools literally in our pockets, but it's important to understand the underlying mechanics of those things. Like if you can understand sort of how it works, that's still valuable, right? So but it's also good to know how to use the tools. I mean, all AI is a tool. And so when you think about it in that way, if you go forward trying to deny it or subdue it as an educator or an employer or whoever, you're gonna fail because it's here and it's happening. You're better off learning how to utilize this tool properly. Another example I like is maybe even a more powerful one is did you ever see that movie Hidden Figures? It's based on a true story of the women that helped launch the space shuttle.
Mm-hmm.
They were in a job pool. Like there was a big group of women, Black women, as a matter of fact, who were called computers, and they all had pencils and they would compute. They would do the math longhand with pencils. And within the course of the time period represented in this movie, the company there, NASA, got the first big giant IBM computer that filled a room. Now, what do we say about that? Well, that's going to take all their jobs. That's terrible. It's going to take all their jobs. Yes, it is. Is it terrible? Well, look at how much more can be done. So right now we're seeing like, oh, AI is going to take jobs, and people are up in arms about it. But there was one character in the movie. I can't remember the character. It's a real woman. Instead of being scared or complaining she was going to lose her job, she went to the library and bought books on programming. And she learned how to code that big giant IBM computer. A Black woman in the 60s did this, and she became like the first like one of the first computer programmers. And she went on to have like a management position at NASA instead of just being this lowly computer with a pencil, right? So there are people who are going to be left behind in this revolution. And there are people who are going to realize that this is an opportunity and they are going to take advantage of it. So what that looks like in the future, I mean, it's super easy to see now. We already hear a lot of people talking about prompt engineers as a job. I think that's short-sighted. That's a thing right now that is that's just going to be like a low-level thing. That's not going to be like a major career. But there's really no telling how many areas of life that this is going to affect. Do you have ideas? Do you have things that you've already got in your mind about like second, third, fourth level repercussions?
Well, I like what you're saying about going back in history. So another example, like the calculator, is the internet versus the library versus the Encyclopedia Britannica versus oral traditions and books.
Right.
Like we go back and back into how we pass information and access information, and it's like literally exploding exponentially. So right now we already have too much information. Like there's just so much information coming at us. So it's no longer about the volume, it's about the quality and the kind of minimizing it. I haven't spent too much time thinking about it. I need to, because I would start to see some things, but I think we're going to see people who fight back against it, like kind of like the Luddite thing, where people used to throw shoes in the gears of the machine that was taking the factory jobs. There's like a kind of a revolution against the internet, which I'm a believer in terms of like, hey, your brain needs a break. Don't be online all the time. Don't have the phone in front of your
Right.
face all day long. Don't talk to AI all day long either. Like we're going to have that same thing again with AI. There is such thing as too much AI.
Yeah, like
So
don't let your brain turn to mush. Like you
yeah,
gotta still think. Don't just
yeah,
let machines do it for you. Yeah, for
yeah. And this
sure.
happens every time when we get new technology. Like when the automobile was first introduced, there was lots of car accidents and figuring out how do
Yeah.
we share the streets with horses, and then eventually the horses weren't on the streets anymore. But over time, like humanity has always adapted in terms of jobs and stuff like that. I mean, there could be big changes in terms of um, it is possible that it's kind of like a game of musical chairs where there literally won't be enough jobs. Like that could happen, but I'm confident in the human ability to figure out how to deal with that, like in terms of
Yeah,
like that being a benefit that
for
hey,
sure.
we figured out how the machines, both the hardware and the software, can support us. Let's figure out a way to still take care of society and make sure everybody's covered and like kind of figure that out. Like I'm confident we can do that, but I think we're going to
Yeah.
see some of those issues arising in the next 10 years for sure.
Yeah.
Of
I
like,
mean, when
yeah,
tractors were invented, farmers were thought they were gonna be out of jobs, right?
right.
When
Yeah.
the camera was invented, painters thought it was gonna end painting. Like there's so many different points in history where new technology technically reduced or eliminated jobs, but it creates so many new ones.
Hmm.
And, it opens up the world to so many more amazing things. Now, that is not to say that this isn't without cause for concern. There are tons of ethical issues with all of this.
Hmm.
The art world right now is really up in arms about the ethics of AI art generation because it has scanned the internet. These AI machines have scanned the images that are on the internet and they're able to recreate art in the style of different artists and things. We haven't really talked about the art side of it, but have you played around with Dall-E or Midjourney or
Yeah. I've played
any of
around
those?
with all of them or
Oh
many of
yeah,
them.
you
Yeah.
have all those profile pictures of it. The which one was that from? Was that Imagine that you used for those?
That was Imagine. I literally have like 700 and I didn't want to like spam the internet with everything, but I also have given that as a gift to people that like at Christmas I like, did the whole thing for some
Oh, that's
people
a
that
great idea.
are not as techie as me and they're like, "Whoa, me is like a queen, me is a superhero, me is this and that."
Yeah.
It's kind of fun. So,
That's awesome. Yeah. So the art stuff is super cool. But then you think like, okay, so it's pretty cheap, right? Like, what is it, $30 or something? And you can go and generate a whole bunch of images of
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, like
Maybe.
300 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so why is it so cheap? Why are they doing that? Well, guess what? You're giving them your face. So what
Yeah.
happens there? Right? There's nothing really locked down. I'm not a particularly like panicky conspiracy theorist person on that. Like we're not off grid, you guys. Like if you want to be off grid, like you got to like throw away your phone, you got to get off this podcast for sure. Like this is not right. Like there's no like the grid is everywhere. It's you really have to be determined to be off of it. But there are certainly like that's a small example, but there are tons of privacy concerns when we're doing this. So Chat GPT, if anybody played around with that or used that for anything, you think you're using it, guess what? It's using you. It was getting information. It was learning how people used it. They were losing or spending is a better word. Like I think it was like $3 million a day or something. Like the numbers were all different, but like millions and millions of dollars were spent allowing that to be free because it takes computing power, tons of computing power to generate this content and stuff. So even though it's fairly inexpensive to generate content as a user, on a mass scale like they did where they opened it up for free, it was very costly. But they were learning from us while we were learning from it. So there, so there's all of that. And the art one is really one of the more controversial ones because, you can generate text and you can run it through a plagiarism checker very easily, but there is no tool like that for art. And what constitutes somebody's personal art?
One pixel difference. Like if one
right, like
different,
what makes it unique. And on one side of the argument, you can say like, well, okay, Mr. or Miss Artist, how did you learn to be an artist? You learned from looking at examples of other people's art, right? Like you some people learned from copying the greats, right? Like you hear that a lot. Like go look at the Renaissance artists and copy them, try and duplicate their works, and you generate your own style eventually, and you learn what you're good at and things like that. So that's one side of it, that like, okay, well, it learned from all those just like you did on imagery that was publicly available. So is it theft or is it not? But then you start looking closer and you see some of these images that get generated. They actually sometimes have little snippets of like signatures, which is not taking inspiration from something, that is actually copying. So then there's a whole big gray area of the ethics around this that you can sort of very easily argue both sides of. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see where things fall. And the other thing is, who gets to be in charge of that? Who gets to determine what's okay and what's not okay? This isn't a national thing. This is a global tool that's been created. So how do you determine like who gets to say what's okay and what's not okay, right?
Yeah. And I think I heard this debate too, with the way search engines work, where there's a file on websites called robots.txt, I think, which gives the creator the ability to block search engines if they want to. So perhaps in the future of the internet and at least our internet-based content, maybe there will be a new like robots.ai file where creators can choose to they want to get the content out, or they want to protect it from fair use or AI or whatever. So it is complicated, but at the end of the day, I like to think of the analogy of 3D printing. So if you look at building a house, what I'm really excited for within 10 years is the ability to be able to 3D print a house. Because if you've ever built a house or done an addition or construction project, you're assembling all these different tools. There's a lot of manual processes. There's a lot of delays and inefficiencies and this and that. But what if a truck could roll up? It has all these inputs of like different materials, and then like a bunch of, scaffolding of structure is erected, and it literally like prints a house in a day or two. How cool is that? That's where we're going.
It's coming. It's coming. Yeah, for sure. I don't know if it'll even take 10 years. I mean, with the speed with which this stuff is happening is pretty nuts. So here's another scenario that's a little bit tricky to think about. I got to readjust because lights are coming in from outside. But so the AIs only have access to up to a certain point, right? So they're not actively searching the internet at this point.
I've noticed that when I've gotten some error messages that say things like, oh, this URL was created after 2021. Like you said, like there's a model it's trained on, and then it stops. And in my mind, I was like, why don't we just release it on the internet? Like, so right. But I think there's probably some ethics issues and some fact checking issues or something.
There are ethics. There are. And also, so the difference between, this is something I want to talk about a little bit. The difference between, so there, a lot of people are saying like ChatGPT, oh, it's going to be a Google killer, right? But what's the difference between doing a search of the internet and asking an AI a question when it's been trained on the internet? To me, it's not remotely the same thing. You're asking the AI to make a judgment on what content is true, what content is the best. When we do a Google search, yes, we trust Google to serve up things that it's using trust factors and things like that to say like what's the most relevant. But we have pages and pages of Google results that are generated by human beings that we get to evaluate what answers we believe and trust. Or you get to say like, oh, multiple people have said this, but a few people have said that. Whereas AI is giving you like its interpretation, full stop. And so when you're doing a search of other generated content, you know, which at this point is pretty much all generated by humans, it's up to you still. And so that's a big difference. Now, there is going to be sort of a combo effect happening, which this is going to be the craziest prediction that is out there right now, but it's going to be true. It's almost fact. Bing is going to surpass Google. Like if you'd have told me 6 months ago, I would say that, I would have laughed.
Why?
Because by a show of hands, who has ever even used Bing? Exactly. Nobody. Like it's hard to even, like, you forget Bing even exists. But
because Microsoft's investment in
in.
OpenAI.
Microsoft is going all in on AI, and they are going to incorporate these AI large language models and the other processing tools into their search. So it's going to be a combo, which is going to be super powerful. But think about this scenario for a second. We've got, it only goes up to 2021, right? So now we're in 2022 is when this whole thing starts busting wide open. Thousands of people start generating AI content, right? They're creating AI generated content. So the internet then becomes flooded with AI content. Then we open up AI to search the internet, and it's
searching itself.
It's finding content that it generated that may or may not be true.
Yeah.
Some of the things it comes back with are like, it's fabrication. It's not accurate and it's not true.
But
if you like, you can go into
creating content that's not necessarily true on the internet. Like people are,
sure. Yeah. But it's, to me, it's like that. Then it becomes like the AI feeding itself, which seems to be such a different thing, right? And so, you know, like you can go on, like in Bertha, there's a bio. You can write a bio. You could say like, write a bio for Chris Badgett. You can just say that. And it will generate all this stuff about like where you went to school and what you did and blah, blah, blah. It's not true. It's going to have the format of it. And then you could just go in and swap out like, this is the degree I got, or this is the school, you know, like you swap out the schools and stuff. But it does a format, but it doesn't have all the factual details. But if you start generating tons of that stuff, and then it's just feeding this machine, it's like, I don't know, it just becomes like, are we going to end up with this like weird closed loop of information that like we're just generating content based on the content that was already, you know, like, I don't know. It just seems that's an interesting problem that's going to need to be overcome, I think.
Well, maybe we can learn from Wikipedia or something there where like there's all this constant like human editing happening or something.
Yeah.
I mean, the humans and the machines have to work together. Like it's not like, yeah, for the quality. Yeah, there's got to be a way for the people to work together. Last question, Steph. You mentioned like generative content, I think. What else other uses are there besides generative content?
Oh, you mean in AI?
Yeah.
So generative means to generate, to create. So you can generate text, you can generate code, you can generate art, you can generate all these things. But AI has already existed in many ways, as far as, you know, analytics in things like self-driving cars. That's AI for sure, you know, and that's going to take off even more. Like we're going to really start to see that technology. That's one that I'm excited for because I don't like to drive. I like to be chauffeured if possible. So yeah, I mean, in healthcare, that's going to be another, like that to me is going to be a really, really beneficial one where
diagnosis and
we're
stuff.
using more analytical elements of AI. So rather than having, you know, you go to this doctor and that specialist and this thing and that thing, and then you go to somebody, your general doctor when you're sick, and they don't have the whole picture for starters. They have an imperfect human limited mind for second, you know, so they don't have like the history of medical documents to base things on, you know. So if you can go in and give it variables like of your history and all that is continually being fed in throughout your life. I mean, kids that are born now, pretty much they're going to have AI diagnoses when they're older, which is in some ways, you still, like at this point anyway, it still needs human oversight for sure. But you can see how something like that could end up being more accurate than
like interpreting
only.
an X-ray or a CAT scan or whatever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like what if it was using the data set of all X-rays and CAT scans of ever, and what actually happened, like following the patient and all that? Like, it's just insane.
Yeah. Or what happens when, you've got a person's entire, like every single test result, every single thing that has happened to them. I have a close friend who is like in her late 40s, randomly got like a growth in her brain and had to have brain surgery. Like it happened in a week. And they don't know what caused it, but she had a crazy bad infection like 3 months before that. And no, it wasn't on anybody's radar, and nobody knew that was, so then she's got these symptoms, and it takes how long to identify that there's an actual problem there? Well, if you've got these incredibly, like, it's not intelligence, but it's informed. They have all of the data that they can crunch. Like a human mind, we can't hold all that data. Even if we couldn't hold a doctor can't hold all that data for every single one of their patients, right? So they can take that kind of stuff and process it and come up with different solutions, warnings, all kind of things, and treatment options and stuff. I mean, I think the potential in the medical field is going to be phenomenal.
It's a rabbit hole. Go check out the Sizzle.ai, because I would encourage you to get in front of this issue and just kind of fall in love with it. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunities here. So better to like learn from people like Steph, who have really been in this space for, multiple years ahead of the majority as an early adopter. And also check out Bertha.ai to use AI on your website to not replace you, but accelerate what you can do. Any final words for the people, Steph?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are at a huge advantage. If you're a follower of Chris Badgett, if you've made it 53 minutes into this podcast listening to us talk about it, then you have an advantage. And that is that you're probably a geek, and you're probably interested in technology. You're probably, I don't know, maybe you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're a free thinker, maybe you like to learn new things, right? You're a lifelong learner, as Chris is and I am. You have a huge advantage because this is available to us now. It's available to other people too, but it's technically out of their reach because it seems too scary and too complicated and things like that, right? The Luddites or the moms of the world might not be, like my mom could not care less about this kind of thing. It's going to affect her life, but she's not, like we are on the cutting edge of a huge technological revolution, which is an awesome, we're the ones that are going to start defining what those new roles are and how we can use this in our lives. So, by the way, I think that we should give your audience a hookup. I think we're going to give everybody some extra words if they sign up for Bertha AI. We'll give you some extra words and some extra images. So let's do, I'll have to go set up the code as soon as I get off of this live. But if you're listening on the podcast, go use code LIFTER 2023. And we'll let me write that down so I do the right one. Chris, write that down and remind me what code I just LIFTER 2023, and go sign up for Bertha.ai and get some extra words, because that's how you learned, by playing around with it.
That's awesome. So LIFTER 2023 is the coupon code, Bertha.ai. Check out Steph's AI newsletter at the Sizzle.ai. Thanks for coming on the show, Steph. We really appreciate it.
This was super fun. Thanks for having me. I mean, I always love hanging out with you, Chris, but I geek out over this topic, as you can probably see.
Awesome. And that's a wrap for this episode of LMS Cast. Did you enjoy that episode? Tell your friends and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And I've got a gift for you over at LifterLMS.com/gift. Go to LifterLMS.com/gift. keep learning, keep taking action, and I'll see you in the next episode.